So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jose Rivera. I'm the Executive Director for the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. Welcome all of you to our 2018 annual meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Forum. We have what we think is a great agenda planned for you today. You'll let us know after the event's over. The MAP Forum, for those of you that don't know, it's a consortium of metropolitan planning organizations and councils of government in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and now Pennsylvania that work together to better coordinate planning activities in a multi-state metropolitan region. We plan and invest for today to make sure that our transportation system is better equipped for tomorrow. So that's why NYMTC is very pleased to hold this annual event, and it's really an honor to be part of the discussions and the collaboration and sharing of information that takes place all the time in terms of us trying to improve our transportation systems. So to begin the event today, I would like to call my fellow members, beginning to my right.
Good afternoon, I'm Mary Amin, representing Mary Kay Murphy for the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority.
Hi, I'm Tracy Askovich, representing Becky Bradley from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission in Pennsylvania. We're happy to be here.
My name is Sam Gold. I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments.
My name is Megan Sloan. I'm representing Matt Folda of the Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments.
My name is Mark Nielsen, Deputy Director in Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, centered in the city of Waterbury, Connecticut.
Thank you. And I believe we have other representatives from the MPOs and COGs that have not introduced themselves yet. I guess not. Mistaken. So let's continue with our program, but I will be very remiss if I don't also recognize the South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, the Dutchess County Transportation Council, and the Southeast Connecticut Council of Governments for their partnership. They're not members of the MAP Forum, but they are very important partners for our regional planning efforts. So now, without further ado, we have the honor and pleasure today to have North Jersey Transportation Planning Chair Peter Palmer and First Vice Chair Andrew Estrada. Chairman Palmer, you have a few words to say?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward very much to this. NJTPA are the officers serve 2-year terms. Mine is coming to an end. I will be being succeeded in a few weeks by my friend Angel Estrada, the freeholder for Union County, and our current first vice chair. We have a policy that we adhere to very carefully about we alternate parties in these chairmanships. And it's amazing how that cuts down or almost totally eliminates partisan posturing or other nonsense like that. The same way we work together very well as a result. We're here because, I mean, the monumental issue to us, and I think everybody, is getting across the Hudson River, both people and goods. New York Harbor is actually in New Jersey. New York Port is actually in New Jersey, as most of you know. But there's just so much with respect to getting across that river, and I'm rather unenthusiastic about what appears to be the likelihood of major transportation investments. We've heard talk both on last year's election and in this year's gubernatorial election. I'm not optimistic about getting money spent where it needs to be spent, but if you will excuse that comment or whatever, it's I hope I'm wrong. But at any rate, I really appreciate MPIC hosting this event, and I hope we all get a lot out of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Farmer. I was forgot to say that Chairman Farmer has been the chair of NJTPA since 2016, and he first joined NJTPA in 1999, and is the founder and chair of the Planning Authority's Great Initiatives Committee. We need to emphasize that. Freeholder Estrada, Mr. Estrada joined the NJTPA Board of Trustees in 2012, after previously serving as an alternate. He was first elected as a freeholder in 1999 and has more than 30 years of business and public service experience. Mr. Estrada, if you want to say a few words yourself, you're welcome to. So again, it's a pleasure to have both of you here today and being part of this. Every time we have a public meeting here, we have an obligation to go over emergency evacuation procedures if that emergency arises. So I believe I have a staff member here, Setu. Yep. Can you please go over the procedures?
Okay, so in the event of an emergency, there are 5 emergency stairwells in this building. Oh, go. Okay. All right, so in the event of an emergency, there are 5 emergency stairway exits in this building. To get to them, you go up the door that you mentioned to get here, make an immediate left, and that takes you to the common corridor or hallway, where you'll find the 2 most closest emergency exits. Each emergency stairwell can be identified through overhead signs, as you can see here, that will direct you to the various exits. Now I request that all NYMTC staff members stand and raise their hand, please. Actually, that's you, please. So in the event of an emergency, please await instruction from building management. Also, NYMTC staff will be able to assist you to evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. Additionally, if you need assistance exiting the building, please let me know or any other NYMTC staff member in attendance. Otherwise, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Setu. I would be very remiss also if I don't give acknowledgement and many thanks to the 2 individuals that made this event happen today. Our planning director, Jerry Bogart, who's somewhere in the back, I believe, and then Mary Amin, who I'm going to turn it over to in a few seconds. They both spearheaded the development of a new expanded MOU, and Mary's going to talk a little bit about that. Mary.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a brief history lesson. The original map forum was the result of some certification review recommendations back in the mid-2000s. North Jersey Transportation Planning Authorities in 2006, and NYMTC in 2007. And our federal funding partners, and I don't know if there's anyone here from FTA, FHWA, or great, well, thank you for your foresight of this. Recommended, it's really a good idea, you're such big MPOs and you have so much in common, you really ought to talk to each other and, do things together. And we said to them very nicely and politely, oh, we do that. We go to each other's meetings, we talk, we exchange information. And they said to us, that's very nice, but you really need to formalize that. So we said, okay, we'll formalize it. So we got together, the 3 MPOs that formed the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut watershed were NYMTC, NGOs, and what was then SWRPA, and Southwest Region Metropolitan Planning Area. And we formed an MOU, we entered it. A couple of the other Connecticut MPOs at the time felt that they were interested, even though they didn't have to join. Housatonic Valley and Greater Bridgeport, Housatonic Valley, and Gary, who did I miss? There was one other Connecticut one, which is evading me now. Anyway, South Central. What happened was, I'll go with that. What happened was, during the intervening years, we did nice things, we worked together, we had annual meetings, we exchanged information, we did many wonderful things, and then Connecticut reorganized their planning map, their whole planning organization, so that now Connecticut has COGs, councils of government. And so, this I think was back in 2014, Jerry said, well then, we really ought to reorganize the map form, because there are agencies on it that don't exist anymore, and there are people that we need to add that do exist but aren't shown. So we started this process in 2014 to expand and update the membership of the map forum. And meanwhile, what else happened was we had a new transportation federal legislation. We had new planning regs, and then what happened was we got this notice of proposed rulemaking that came out in 2016. And I would tell you that if anything brought the various MPOs and planning agencies in this region and in these 4 states and beyond together, it was how we responded to the notice of proposed rulemaking that would have really created some burdens and some hardships, both financially and logistically, on all the planning agencies really in the Northeast. And that really created, we worked together to collect and consolidate our comments and to make sure that we were consistent, if not identical, with one another's messages. And meanwhile, we got more and more people more members, more and more agencies to say, yeah, we want to sign on to this. So now we have 9 agency members, including Pennsylvania and Orange County, and we're going to continue the good work that we started. And basically, I'm watching the clock because I want to allow time for other people to speak. But I think the most important thing is that what we come together to do is to do coordinated transportation planning in a multi-state environment. And the agreement is really crafted to allow everyone to do things their way and to have the freedom to do their work at the pace that makes sense for them, but we exchange information, and it's all voluntary. We're all here, everybody at this table, we're here voluntarily. And it's been working. We've been acknowledged by the feds for being a model of regional cooperation, and so we continue to keep doing that, and our numbers are increasing, so that can only be a good thing. About the MOU, it basically has 4 or 5 sections, and I would note that the signature pages are actually longer than the actual text of the MOU, so that tells you sometimes less is better. There's a general section which basically says we're going to have an annual meeting. We're doing that today. and then we exchange information as we put together our various individual unified planning work programs. We exchange information and share best practices on modeling and data. And Affection is also dedicated to how we exchange information about our long-range plans, and you're going to hear about some of that later today, and our transportation improvement program, as well as air quality conformity. So all these things bring us together. Today there's a big focus on Trans-Hudson issues. That also brings us all together. So it was a long time coming, but our doors are open, and I want to thank everybody who's at this table and their agency reps for being as patient and providing a good set of documents that we all agreed on. So it only took a few years. But thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about that. And we have a few extra copies that I don't plan on carrying back across the river. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and to our fellow MAP forum members, I'd like to open it up to each one of you to say a few words.
RiverCog is very happy to be part of this. We, although physically on the edge of the New York Metro, the New Haven Urbanized Area is the destination of the New Haven line, and you can't only be planning for one end of it, and or seeing each other infrequently at planning events like the APA conference that New York hosted this past spring. We're, as Mary said, the 2016 proposed rulemaking brought us together, and the ability of all the different COGs and NGOs to work together, I think, was really shown by NYMTC's recent freight plan, and how you were able to convene MPOs in 2 different states, or actually no, in 4 different states, to create probably what will be one of the most comprehensive freight plans that there is, and that this agency has created. So we're happy to be a part of that, and happy for how that helps us in our planning. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Tracy.
Hi, yeah, so we're really excited to be here, also on sort of the edge here, and we recognize how important we in our infrastructure is to support your network, and in events like Hurricane Sandy, and potential future events that might happen, and mass migration that might occur, and the freight development that we've had in the Lehigh Valley are all very important to what's going on here in the coastal zone. So we're really excited to be here.
Thank you. And at the end,
as one of the, Mary reminded us how long ago we started this effort. I was at one of the original MAP forum meetings, and it always struck me that, what was Connecticut doing there? We're kind of a small state, small region, and we're partnering with North New Jersey and New York City, and we always sort of felt like, what are we doing here? But it's been a great partnership over the years, and over that time we've gotten to know the staff at both North Jersey Transportation Authority and NYMTC. We've exchanged data, and that data has been very helpful to our planning efforts. And Connecticut is on the side of the metropolitan area that we are. What happens in New York and New Jersey really affects what's going on in Connecticut. So it's been very helpful to be aware of those projects and include those into our and consider those in our transportation planning program. And again, I can't emphasize enough how much we gain from this effort, and we really appreciate the efforts of NYMTC and North Jersey on organizing and keeping the whole thing going. And we do welcome working with other, regions as they join. As Dan alluded to, the NPRM really was the, I think, coalescing factor, really brought us all together, and it did. At first we thought it was just something that our region was concerned about, and then when groups in Delaware Valley, and we also had contacted the MPOs in the Pioneer Valley of Massachusetts and the Boston area of Massachusetts. So you can really see how far, we do stretch. So again, as Sam said, it's been great being a partner in this and hope to continue.
Yes, and especially with the NPRM, we had everything in place already. We already had that partnership, so it was very helpful to use that as an example when we responded to the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comments. Does anyone have any questions on? I think we set it up later, and we'll have a few members of the public come in and ask questions of us. So part of our program today is just to go over regional issues, actually regional, not so much issues, but updates on major efforts that all the MPOs here are very much involved in. One is transportation performance management, specifically the urbanized area coordination efforts that have been ongoing for many months now, and Keith Miller from NGDPA will be providing an overview of that. And then also we'll be providing a presentation on the post-hurricane Sandy Transportation Resilience Study in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we have Brian Tentihoff from Cambridge Systematics providing a presentation. And at the conclusion of the discussion of those items, we will have a roundtable discussion on, as Mary alluded to before, on the Trans-Hudson Studies projects. So we look forward to your input there also. And then after that, we'll have a public participation time period. After that, we'll have a discussion on organizational issues. Mary mentioned before that both NYMTC and NJDPA have recently adopted regional transportation plans, so we'll be talking about that also. I guess in terms of the regional issues, 3MCB, Keith, well, before I bring Keith on, I know we have another MAP forum member to join us, and don't want to put you in the spot. A few words and introduction, please.
Francis Fick, Executive Director, Western Connecticut Council of Governments.
You want to say a few words, Francis, about the MAP forum?
Well, I was a bit distracted by the 3 car wrecks on the way down. So obviously safety is a huge concern for all of us, and we look forward to working together in the implementation of performance measures, including safety across our respective urbanized areas and states. MAP forum has a long history, goes back to pre-consolidation in the state of Connecticut, and we are excited to continue to be members of the MAP forum as Western Connecticut Council of Governments and to move forward with our bigger, better, future trillion-dollar transportation plan and performance measures everywhere.
Thanks, Keith, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Jose and Jerry, especially for asking me to come here and talk to you about the national performance measures, particularly the urbanized area coordination that we're undertaking. Oh, okay. Is that better? Yeah, I can hear myself now better. Just as some context, I wanted to point out that in the federal transportation regulations are leading us towards performance management, and they have set forth particular performance measures in various areas. So this table shows you the various performance measures that the FHWA and FTA have set forth for states and MPOs to use in the various areas, such as safety, number of fatalities, serious injuries, particularly non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the condition of the infrastructure, pavement and bridges, the performance of the national highway system with travel time reliability and carbon emissions, the freight system with travel time reliability, the congestion management air quality program has two separate areas for congestion. They look at excessive delay and non-SOV travel, and for emissions on emissions reductions, particularly from CMAQ projects. And then there are transit measures for assets, for vehicles and facilities and tracks, and for safety for transit as well. But for urbanized areas, the feds have specified that these two measures for the CMAQ congestion, the excessive delay in peak hours and the percent non-single occupancy vehicle travel, need to be calculated and set for the entire urbanized area. So that's what the coordination we're going to talk to you about. A word about the milestones. Each of these performance areas is on a different time frame, not to make things easy for us, but you can see that safety, the initial statewide targets were due this past August, and MPO targets are due in February. Transit assets, in particular the CMAQ project, the CMAQ congestion measures, which are done at the urbanized area, are due statewide, or the urbanized area-wide targets are due this coming May, and those need to be updated every 2 years after the first round will be done in October. Just a note about the urbanized area, kind of looks kind of similar to the map form map, a little bit smaller, but you can see that very large chunks of the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority area, pretty much all of the MTC area, a little bit of Delaware Valley, and a really tiny bit of Connecticut, and it borders on Orange County. So those are all the parties involved. Word or two about requirements. As I mentioned, the targets are due this coming May on the 20th, but the targets, the wrinkle is that the targets are as a single target for the entire urbanized area. So all of the agencies have to coordinate and set a single target. It's reported that those targets are reported by the state DOTs in October, and the agencies that are required to coordinate are states and MPOs with national highway system mileage in their urbanized area. In addition, there needs to be an agreement among all the parties that documents how they will share data and how they will select and report their targets and how they will do performance reporting. So that's another thing that we're coordinating on. So finally, the coordination, we're doing it sort of like voting, early and often. You can see the various members that I've talked about, that their logos are shown here, the MPOs, just the 3 state DOTs, and we also have coordination with our FHWA divisions. We've had monthly coordination meetings, sort of on a policy level with a large group starting in July, and then in November we decided we needed to spawn off a more technical data and tools group, which has also been meeting monthly and having very in-depth conversations about the data that's involved in the various tools. So that's really what I wanted to update everyone on today. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them, or contact me, or Jan Kahn, or Jerry, or thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Our next presentation is another collaborative effort, Federal Highway, State DOT, Cambridge Systematics, generally speaking, to that effort.
All right, thanks. I'm going to put a timer out here. I've been asked to keep this to 15 minutes or so, and that's going to translate to about 40 pages per minute of our final report. So pardon me as I go through this very quickly, but my goal here today is just to give you an overview and what your appetite to go to FHWA's website, find the information that's been generated as part of this study, and peruse it at your leisure. We were happy to have worked with FHWA and a whole range of stakeholders, and so continuing with the theme of regional collaboration. This is the type of effort that required a regional look at resilience and required a lot of regional collaboration and coordination. I'll talk a little bit about the background, how we got to this study, the partnerships that emerged, and the results, the lessons learned, the challenges, and the recommendations that resulted from the study. Of course, we call it the post-Sandy study, shorthand. In fact, what we looked at were the combined impacts of 4 events that hit this region in 2011 and 2012. Many of you remember the back-to-back hits of Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee in 2011, which were a precursor, of course, to what was to come with Sandy. And also, in the middle of all this, a Halloween nor'easter that dumped a huge amount of snow and ice on southwest Connecticut and central Connecticut and caused enormous transportation system disruptions due to the power losses due to that storm. These events combined really woke us up. We were thinking about climate change. This wasn't new to the region, but this is really, okay, every elected official, everybody was impacted by these events in this entire region. And it really eliminated a whole range of transportation challenges and resilience issues throughout our multimodal transportation system. We had just recently completed a pilot project looking at how do we use a resilience framework in transportation planning in New Jersey. So NJTPA and NJDOT and a variety of, and DVRPC, and a variety of stakeholders in the state of New Jersey participated in a pilot project in 2011 in which we looked at potential impacts of sea level rise and storm surge and other climate events on the transportation system in the Delaware River Valley and, as you see on the screen here, along the Atlantic coast of northern New Jersey. It was an opportunity for us to kind of do some scenario planning, do some what-if analysis, and unfortunately, we were able to compare the results of this analysis to the actual impacts of Sandy when that event happened. There were a lot of course, disruptions that had occurred just due to nor'easters and regular coastal storms before Sandy even hit, and since Sandy that kind of made this study really useful to the state of New Jersey and these areas. But of course, Sandy itself wreaked havoc and caused a lot of devastation. What this study did was just really think about how do we identify strategies to improve resilience at a broad level. It was a research effort, but it did lay a nice foundation of data and analysis and kind of partnerships and coordination that led to the launch of the Sandy study in the fall of 2013. This is a map very familiar to what we've been showing for multiple presentations here, but this study required and did involve all 3 state DOTs, 4 of the MPOs that are part of the Map Council. The MTA, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey also were heavily involved in the study. And we were fortunate to have participation not only of a project guidance committee made up of representatives from these agencies, but also a technical experts group that met periodically throughout the study that consisted of experts in the field of climate change from around the world who came and participated and helped us as we worked through this really complex analysis. So our objectives were to share with each other our lessons and our experiences and enhance our common understanding of how do we improve resiliency to climate and extreme weather events in the long term, and also acknowledge that we were in the midst of a really complex and extensive recovery process in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. One of the FHWA's key goals also was to identify feasible and cost-effective strategies to reduce and manage extreme weather vulnerabilities. So how do we make the use of limited resources, acknowledge the fact that we don't have unlimited money and resources to address the challenges associated with extreme weather and climate change, and try to be as cost-effective as we can. And then advance the state of the knowledge. At the core, this was a research project. We didn't have the opportunity to do everything we wanted to do as part of this effort, but I do think we accomplished a lot, as you'll see in the rest of this presentation. There were essentially 4 key components of the work plan. First, we looked back at the regional damage and disruption from those 4 events that I mentioned. We compiled all of the information that was available to us at the time of the study on the disruption and the damage that happened to the transportation system. We then moved into more of a forward-looking vulnerability assessment at a regional scale. We stepped down from that and said, what if we, instead of looking at the entire region, looked at focusing on small networks or corridors where we saw high levels of vulnerability around the region. So that third step is about sub-area level, what we call sub-area level vulnerability and risk assessments. And then finally, for 10 facilities around the region, specific facilities, we did more in-depth deep dives and looked at the vulnerability and risk assessment process as applied to a specific facility or even components of that facility, and how do we evaluate potential adaptation strategies. So that's what I'm going to run through in the next few slides. We had a vulnerability and risk assessment framework that was applied for purposes of the study. It's something that's explained in depth in the report, so I encourage you, if you want to go on FHWA's website and download the report, I'll show the link later. You can get into the details of how each of these steps in the process is applied at the regional level, at the area of kind of a sub-area, small network or corridor level, and finally at a facility level. It was really interesting as we went through the study to see how the data work, how do the regional coordination and stakeholder involvement processes work. Well, how do we use the information and the tools at our disposal at various scales? For the regional damage and disruption assessment, this was a process that we were undertaking in the wake of Sandy, but not certainly not by the end of the point at which all the stakeholders had done and completed their damage assessment. So while we found enormous amounts of information about system disruptions, about damage, about emergency relief funding requests that have been submitted to FHWA and FDA, FEMA requests, and various other sources, we actually found that as of October 2013, about a year later, we only had a part of the picture. However, even with that limited information, we could start to see trends. We could see where we saw where there were clusters of damaged facilities. What was the reason these facilities failed? What was the climate stressor? What was the mode of transportation? What was the context that we saw for each of these storm events? And it started to help us paint a picture about what had happened during these 4 specific events, and helped us as we shifted towards our more forward-looking vulnerability assessment, what may happen in the future. We also had the benefit of a lot of support from NJTPA and Transcom, the Regional Transportation Management Association, that helped us look at actual operational data. So in addition to reported damage and things for which it rose to the level that somebody felt the need to submit an ER funding request or apply for a FEMA grant, we actually were able to sift through the operational data for the regional highway network and see where did we have actual disruptions to the system, and do a compilation of that and do kind of a snapshot showing how long were these impacts, how long did these disruptions take place. And that was both for the highway system and the transit network in the region. It was really interesting to see that, because it also gives you a sense of magnitude, not just the cost of the damage, excuse me, as reported to FEMA or FHWA FTA, but actually how long was this facility out of service, because a big component of this analysis was looking at the economic impacts of disruption as well. When we moved into the forward-looking assessments, we were also fortunate to be working in parallel with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers North Atlantic Coast Comprehensive Study. This is a tremendous, huge effort to look along the Atlantic coast and run slosh models and run SLAM models and run all kinds of data to help us generate maps of potential future inundation under a large number of potential future climate scenarios. So we had a lot of information at our disposal to be able to start mapping where the Army Corps' models and others, and NOAA and other project partners' models were showing potential future impacts on the system, overlay the transportation system, and dive down and actually get a closer look at what was happening to the transportation networks in each of these scenarios. So we have a whole host of maps available and the underlying data has been compiled into a geodatabase. It's being made available to FHWA and in turn to the MPOs and states in this region that will be useful for future adaptation planning. We used our regional assessment to help identify where we saw concentrations of high-risk and very vulnerable facilities. With the Project Guidance Committee, we identified 21 vulnerable sub-areas that you see on the map here. We used a range of criteria and discussions with the Project Guidance Committee to narrow these down to 3 that we would, again, as part of this research effort, didn't have the resources to look at all 21, but we did want to at least apply the vulnerability and risk assessment framework at this scale and see how we could learn how to apply it, what lessons we were learning, and provide kind of a map and kind of a template and a process for people to do this in the future. One of the other things, of course, one of the other considerations was trying to avoid duplication of effort because there were a lot of other and are a lot of other efforts ongoing by New York City, by the Port Authority, the MTA, the states, local governments, et cetera, looking at how to make the system more resilient. So what we tried to do is pick sub-areas that where we could generate useful information and help these regional stakeholders at any level move ahead with planning for resilience. So one of the corridors was the Norwalk-Danbury corridor in Connecticut. It consists of US Route 7 extending north from I-95 and the parallel Metro North Danbury branch, where we were looking at potential riverine flooding impacts on corridor and 2 parallel facilities, trying to understand how does adaptive capacity work when you have 2 parallel transportation facilities, but not much else to take on the burden should one of these facilities fail due to a flood or erosion or other extreme precipitation events. We also looked at the south shore of Raritan Bay. We looked at both a number of critical evacuation routes, also commuter routes, also the North Jersey coastline runs through this area. So we took another multimodal look, but this time more at a transportation network level. Again, adaptive capacity became very important here to think through, okay, in the event that one of these facilities were to be inundated or washed out or otherwise disrupted, where would this travel, this demand for travel be accommodated, and how critical are these facilities in the long term, and what are our options when we see some of these real extreme potential future impacts of sea level rise and storm surge should would impact these facilities in the future. And then, and finally, on the South Shore of Long Island, we were looking at evacuation routes from the barrier islands. So what are the potential impacts of storm surge and sea level rise on these critical facilities that are lifelines, both in the period leading up to a storm, but also, as we saw during the recovery efforts, making sure that these are available for moving people and freight back and forth into and out of these communities before, during, and after an event. We, for each of these sub-area analyses, ended up with extensive adaptation matrices. What we did was to classify potential actions and strategies into near-term and long-term, and also look at agency risk tolerance. So in the event that one of these areas was considered very critical, cannot tolerate a situation where you have a facility closed, what are some of the more aggressive investment strategies and what are some lower level investment strategies where you may be able to tolerate a facility being closed or even washed out in the extreme. So these very detailed lists are available to the region, to all the regional stakeholders, again, if you peruse the final report. As I mentioned, we also took a deep dive into 10 transportation facilities from around the region, ranging from bridges, Bascule bridges to stretches of road to Port Jersey South, the Port Authority New York and New Jersey facility, the ventilation shafts for the Hudson Tunnel, a stretch of the Metro North New Haven line, the transitions from third rail that are catenary power, looking at looking at potential impacts of extreme heat on the electrical components. So a really wide array of transportation facilities from around the region across modes and across climate impacts. One example here shows how we applied that same 4-step process to Bascule Bridge on the Loop Parkway that leads to Long Beach Island, on the South Shore of Long Island. We looked at, actually at a component level here, what were the impacts of these past events? What did the engineers tell us about in terms of potential future impacts that they predict? And what do the data tell us? We were able to rely on detailed schematic drawings that our engineering partners, AECOM, helped us develop to show the actual water levels on the bridge piers and how this may or may not impact electrical components and mechanical components associated with the Basel Bridge. And already underway at the same facility was an analysis of scour, which was erosion of kind of the subbase and underwater erosion that's caused by tidal inflows and outflows that really gets exacerbated by storm surge. That was already ongoing at the time we were even looking at this facility. So a lot of things going on, but we were able to specifically hone in on which components of this facility were the most vulnerable and where money might be best spent on future adaptation and resilience. So I just want to transition at the end here into lessons learned and challenges. So the data and the climate science we take for granted. Everybody knows, okay, everybody just understands, right? In fact, every time we introduce somebody new to this project, whether it was on the consultant side, on the stakeholder side, somebody who we were presenting to in public, we have to remember that the details and the nuances of climate science and climate data are new to most people. Understanding what's useful and what's not, understanding what all of this terminology means that we bandy about, that acronyms and things that you've heard during this presentation that might have sounded unfamiliar that I'm sounding on. Really important to engage and facilitate communication between the climate scientists who understand these projections and all the models, the planners, all of us in the room here, the engineers, the people involved in designing and implementing and operating these facilities. It was one of the most valuable things that I took from the study was to see everybody in the room together having these conversations so that the engineers understood what all of this data meant to them and so that they could communicate back through the planners. So it wasn't just scientists to planners, planners to engineers, as we typically do in our process, but how could the engineers communicate all the way back upstream to people originating the data, developing these models? What do they need? What kinds of information helps them support the cities? A lot of lessons learned about data. We also had a lack of information. In fact, one of the biggest lessons we learned also was that some of the most significant drivers of vulnerability and risk and some of the most significant drivers of the scope and scale of adaptation strategies that drives how much we can afford to pay or how much these strategies cost can be the most difficult to determine. So the long-term impacts of saltwater exposure, or what are the whole comprehensive economic impacts of transportation systems or disruption? How do we estimate these things? Those are some of the biggest challenges we have moving ahead. There's a lot of data available, particularly with respect to sea level rise. So untangling all of this, understanding what's appropriate for what scale and what part of the region is very important. We don't really have a great historical record on the impacts of previous events. Despite everything I said about the information we collected, we know that we just had a snapshot. We had a very incomplete picture of the impacts of even these 4 events, let alone everything that's happened historically in the past. Data availability, again, is a big obstacle. Of course, the intergovernmental relationships, the number of responsibilities and jurisdictions we're dealing with here from the federal level all the way down to the local level, legal and regulatory hurdles, and the amount of resources we have for staff resources, for financial resources to develop and implement adaptation measures. So that's why we're here today, is to try to work through some of these institutional barriers and address some of the things kind of lower on that list. Before I finish up the last slide here, FHWA was very much concerned about not making adaptation and resilience something new, something that kind of stands over here by itself, but rather how do we integrate these into our existing transportation planning and programming and implementation and operation and performance monitoring cycle. So there's a lot of information in the report about how to integrate climate change into transportation decision making throughout this cycle. Understanding that it is a cycle, that we're taking the results, and we're understanding the impacts of what we've done in the past and feeding that back into our new decisions and making things better the next time around is a big part of FHWA's current push of this. I want to conclude with a link to the materials we have available. This is the table of contents for the final report. I'm also available. I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards. If you catch me before I go, or I can take your card and send you a link to the information if you're interested. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. So now I'll give it to Jerry Bogas, the Planning Director, to get us into our next item.
Great. Thanks, Jose. And we're going to take on Trans-Hudson. We have a roundtable discussion. It's actually a rectangular roundtable discussion. I'd like to ask the panelists to come up. And while they're coming up and seating themselves, I just wanted to touch back with this study that you just heard about. First of all, thank Brian for all his yeoman's work. I think you put your kids through college on that study, right? Also, Jeff Perlman is here from NYMTC, and there's a tremendous help in this, and really was also involved in the predecessor study in the Jersey side. And Heather Holzinger, who somehow had a baby in the midst of all this and isn't with us today, but she was with the project manager from FHWA, and of course FHWA did a huge job both funding this effort and leading it. So thank you to both of you. So we have a panel here at the Rectangular Roundtable of Jeremy Clenchel O'Brien from New Jersey Transit, Rebecca Reyes-Elisea from Federal Railroad Administration, and the always popular Lou Bennett from the Port Authority of New Jersey. We have 5 topics we want to cover, but in a roundtable format, so PowerPoints. I just want to show the projects here that we're talking about, and want to point one thing out. This map is a little washed out, but we have 2 lines crossing the Hudson, one for the Hudson Tunnel project, which Jeremy will talk about first, and then one called NEC Future, which Rebecca will talk about, but NEC Future is much bigger than that line, and that's simply a component, so she'll be talking about the context for that potential line. And then Lou will take us home with the Cross Harbor Goods Movement, Lincoln Tunnel, Helix, and Express Bus Lane, and the Port Authority Bus Terminal. So we can do this sequentially. We don't need any grand introductions. Just keep talking, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Jerry. And I guess my math skills aren't great, but I think I have 3 minutes if 15 divided by 5 is correct. So Hudson Tunnel project in a nutshell, and it's probably unintended but very appropriate that we're following Brian's presentation on climate change and the impacts, and frankly, his note about saltwater inundation is particularly appropriate. As you probably know, the existing North River Tunnel, which is the commuter rail line under the Hudson River connecting Penn Station, New York to the first stop is Secaucus, and then Newark, and then all the way on down to DC and beyond. About 2,000 or 3,000 feet, depending on which tube you're talking about, of the existing tunnel was inundated during Sandy, and the damage from that inundation sort of remains, and clearly the only way to rehabilitate those tubes are to shut them down for a prolonged period of time. Right now, you're probably aware that one tube or the other is taken out of service for about 55 hours every weekend, so starting Friday night to early Monday morning, for maintenance and repairs, but that kind of outage does not allow for the type of major rehabilitation that's required to actually repair the damage from Sandy. In order to keep the system running, which I think everyone agrees is an important thing with a couple 100,000 daily trips under the river, the obvious solution is to essentially build another set of tunnels to divert the existing rail traffic during the period of that rehabilitation of the existing tunnel. So that's what the Hudson Tunnel project is about. That project has been often inaccurately referred to as the Gateway Tunnel or something else. This is a project that has its own independent utility. It has its own purpose and need, which is to maintain the existing service on the Northeast Corridor, which is predominantly New Jersey Transit, but also very importantly Amtrak. So that is what we are doing right now. And in terms of the organizational structure of the project, Amtrak is operating the engineering components, so they are currently advancing towards the 30% design. New Jersey Transit, with FRA as the lead federal agency, is managing the environmental impact statement, the NEPA process. Hopefully everyone read the entire DEIS, which came out in the summer. We had a couple of public hearings, and we are currently in the process of working towards a final DEIS, which we expect will be out in the early spring. That's 3 minutes, so I'll pass it along to you.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. So I'm gonna talk about NEC future. Unfortunately, we've had the pleasure of talking to this group over the last several years of this project, and this process has gone through its sort of multiple stages and important milestones. We've reached an important milestone this year in releasing the Tier 1 Final Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, for the entire Northeast Corridor. So important to note that the NEC future scope, as Jerry mentioned for context, is beyond just sort of the Trans-Hudson component, although that is the most critical choke point that exists along the Northeast Corridor. It does look at the entire NEC between Washington, D.C. and Boston. So the purpose of NEC Future is really to come up with a comprehensive plan or vision for the Northeast Corridor to identify what the role we want rail to play is in the Northeast as we move forward and we anticipate growth in the region. The NEC is a critical asset in the transportation structure here, so being responsive to that demand is going to be important. The ROD itself, that record of decision, that's the kind of concludes the NEPA process. That identifies and walks through the selected alternative. That selected alternative did a few different things. First of which, it sort of responds to and prioritizes the existing Northeast Corridor. It identifies some performance and service objectives and targets that we want to meet in order to be responsive to the demand that we expect in the region. It also incorporates the capacity that's going to be needed along the existing NEC as we anticipate the growth in the region to occur. And then we did also include a capacity planning study on the north end of the corridor, and that was largely to be responsive to the needs on the north end, and there was lack of consensus and determination about where exactly that additional capacity should go. So we incorporated that into the selected alternative as well. It's equally important to identify what the record of decision does not do. It does not commit funding to fund any of those projects along the Northeast Corridor. Sort of bringing us back to the fact that we're doing a corridor-wide effort, it's really a plan, a vision, but not committing funding, and also does not lead directly to construction for any of the projects that would be incorporated in that selected alternative. Now, we have a lot of projects that are underway in parallel to the Northeast, to the NEC Future effort. So we're working closely. Jeremy talked about the Hudson Tunnel project, really about preserving the line that we have. So it moved it forward in parallel to the NEC Future program. But now that we have the record of decision, we can start talking about what does the future look like, how do we want to implement the changes and the projects that are incorporated in the record of decision. So next steps for NEC Future. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We've done a lot over the past 5 or 6 years, but we have a lot more ahead of us. In looking to implementation and looking to discussions with all the railroads and the operators, the states, the MPOs play a critical role in this process to identify how we should phase and sequence the improvements that come out of the NEC Future environmental process. So we're working very closely with all the partners that have sort of come through this entire process with us. But in addition, the NEC Commission will play a really strong role in creating a service development plan. That's really going to get to all the funding, financing, phasing, how do we deliver projects. It's really going to require a commitment at all levels to implement something that comes out of NEC Future. And so we look forward to working with all of you. The MPOs here represented in this room have been a part of this process from the beginning, so it's nice to come to a group of familiar faces that are at least aware of what we were doing, because it's a challenging concept to get around most people's brains. But we have reached an important milestone, and we're happy to be here to give you guys an update on where we're headed next.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, colleagues. I just want to say, starting out, that to commend the MPOs that are here and what the map forum represents. There's a Port Authority out of a recognition of the region's leaders many years ago, almost a century ago, that you need to do planning beyond political boundaries, but it's often lonely work. So maybe this is an occasion for us to feel less lonely in what we do, and I'm very happy to be here. I was asked to speak about 3 projects, and before I do, just quickly a little context. I think most of the people in the room have a sense of the range of things that Port Authority does and what it is. But last year, our Board of Commissioners approved a 10-year capital program, really kind of a working agenda, stretches towards $30 billion, so short of that, with needs that go well beyond that, actually. It's largely, as with our sister agencies, a state of good repair, infrastructure renewal agenda, but in all the core transportation functions that the states of New York and New Jersey assigned us in the Port District, interstate travel, port and freight, aviation, we're seeing tremendous growth pressure in all of these areas, so the investment needs not only to renew what we have, but to expand capacity and integrate with other parts of the transportation network are really imperatives for us, and we're trying hard to rise to that challenge. As it happens today, our Board of Commissioners is meeting in Jersey City to approve our calendar year budget for 2018. It's about $8 billion. That includes $3.4 billion in capital investment, and the three projects I was asked to talk about today are all moving forward as part of that budget plan. So first on the bus terminal, Chairman Palmer talked from NJTPA talked about that Hudson River and the challenge of the Hudson River. As I think everyone in the room knows, Trans-Hudson commutation is supported really by three pillars. Commuter rail service to Penn Station from west of the Hudson, the PATH rapid transit system, and the bus network. And as it happens, the commuter bus system carries more west of Hudson commuters in and out of Manhattan than either of the other two modes. All three of these pillars are experiencing demand pressure now and present challenges for the Port Authority and New Jersey Transit in both states. Port Authority bus terminal itself is nearing the end of its useful life. It has structural issues that will compel its replacement in maybe 15 years at the outside as the time frame we're looking at. It also lacks the ability to handle modern sizes and weights of the kinds of buses we're seeing in the fleet, and it lacks the capacity to handle projected growth in bus demand. So several years ago, the agency began a planning process to identify concepts for replacement of the bus terminal. It's been an intensive process, not without some creative tension, as you might say, but one of at this point we think there is a broad consensus that the facility needs to be replaced, and that the numbers point to the need to accommodate some growth in the bus network, even as we look in the near term, mid-range, and beyond to other investments in other modes. So that's a challenge. We are in the process now of completing procurement to retain environmental and engineering planning consultants to undertake a full formal planning process. We'll look at alternatives. In addition to things that have been introduced previously, we have done some work to develop a rebuild in place option that was not evident as an option in the earlier work that we did, and that will be with other alternatives part of the process. There'll be scoping and interagency and public participation. So again, a challenging project, and we hope to move forward with formal planning in a very energetic way this year. And in the meantime, we've got to keep the existing facility operating and managing in an environment with a lot of demand. We're in a community that there's an existing residential community. There's surging development on the west side, many transportation challenges in the network, and we're going to try to encompass all those in the work that we do in the EIS. Lincoln Tunnel Helix. This is the iconic curving roadway structure that brings Route 495 down to the Lincoln Tunnel Toll Plaza. That's ours too. It's very old. We completed a project to extend its useful life a couple of years ago, and we've commenced a project that's funded with Port Authority dollars in the 10-year program to replace the structure. So we're looking at several alternatives. We are treating this as a state of good repair project. We expect to work very closely with agency partners and local jurisdictions as we go through planning. We're looking at alternatives that try to concentrate on that are centered on the existing footprint of the structure, and looking both to support the movement to and from the tunnel and improve accessibility locally, where there's a lot of development on the New Jersey side of the Lincoln Tunnel that needs to be accommodated as we manage the Trans-Hudson flows. So we anticipate finishing design and engineering work by 2022, proceeding to construction and having that done in 2027. So that's the Helix as a quick as a quick profile. Cross Harbor EIS. Nearly 2 years ago, the Port Authority received a record of decision on a Tier 1 EIS for the Cross Harbor Freight Movement Project. Federal Highway Administration was the lead federal agency. This is a study effort of many years in duration, but done in the most recent episode by the City of New York and inherited by the Port Authority. It's closely associated with the concept of a cross-harbor freight tunnel. The Tier 1 EIS narrowed the options to a freight tunnel between Jersey City and Brooklyn to connect to existing rail freight capacity on both sides of the harbor and an enhanced rail car float service. Many of you probably know, some years back, the Port Authority assumed responsibility for the last remaining rail car float service, which carries loaded freight cars between Greenville Yard and Jersey City and Brooklyn. With federal aid and support from EDC and New York State DOT and some support from the Jersey side also, we have rebuilt that service from a sporadic operation to one that's going to break 4,000 loaded carloads this year. Each of those rail cars displaces 3.5 to 4 trucks, and while it seems a small piece, it's part of a strategy supported in both states to try and expand the use of rail freight and expand rail freight movement, particularly east of the Hudson. So that was Tier 1, and this summer, Governor Cuomo and Congressman Jerry Nadler, who's been a champion of this work, announced that the Port Authority would proceed to conduct a second to the Tier 2 EIS, picking up with the rail tunnel alternative and the enhanced car flow options. So today, actually on our board calendar, is authorization to proceed with awarding that work and getting it underway. So we expect to go forward with that. Federal Highways has been a great partner. The City of New York, the State of New York, Long Island Railroad, have all been part of this. And I want to say, while this is a challenging project among many other regional priorities that we're looking to advance and fund, it's very important to continue this planning work. Frankly, you kind of have to fight to protect the ability to deliver freight and to preserve particularly the ability to serve the east of Hudson markets with rail freight. And the right-of-way that carries those rail cars through Brooklyn and Queens, the Hellgate Bridge to the Bronx and up towards Connecticut, it's a coveted thing. And among other concepts, there's a proposal in RPA's 4th Regional Plan to use some of the capacity on that right-of-way for a fixed guideway transit service. Their hope is that these things can operate compatibly. The agencies that are promoting rail freight use are concerned about that, but you can't really defend and advance that without conducting the work to show what its potential is and how it might work on both sides of the region to support expanded use of rail freight. So we're looking forward to that, and I'll stop there.
Great. Well, thank you all for being so succinct, but substantive. I get to ask the first question. So, by the way, Lou, if there's any creative tension at this meeting, we've alerted security downstairs. So, you know, this whole issue is a mega regional issue, even though it's focused physically between New York and New Jersey. It affects goods movement in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, the whole 9 yards. So this is a reason to focus on Trans-Hudson at this particular meeting. So, Jeremy and or Rebecca, we hear a lot about the Gateway Program. Okay, it's a moniker that's hung from just about everything. Can you let people know what the difference is between the Hudson River Tunnel and the Gateway Program?
I'll take a stab at that. So the Gateway Program, which is, I guess I need too much, the Gateway Program, which is something that has been proposed by Amtrak over the last several years. They have done an excellent job of sort of engaging publicly about that and developing support for that. That's a series of investments that essentially create a 4-track railroad, let's just say between Newark and New York. It's a little more complicated than that. And involves a number of other components to eliminate choke points, places where trains try to cross at grade, things like that. That program is theoretically designed to, you know, essentially double the capacity of the commuter rail and regional rail system, you know, under the Hudson River, essentially. So that's a whole series of things. That's where you hear, you know, in the articles that it's $30 billion or whatever it is. That involves all of that stuff and maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Hudson Tunnel is very specifically focused, as I tried to sort of define, as the preservation of what we have today, basically under the Hudson River. So it does not involve new station capacity in New York. It does not involve new track work in New Jersey beyond what is needed to connect essentially the existing Northeast Corridor to the new tunnel. It does not involve things like a new rail yard in New Jersey, which would be essential for us to increase service substantially. It doesn't involve the Secaucus Loop, which would provide, once you ride, service to Rockland County, that was discussed at great length and included in the ARC project last decade now. So it's very different from the Hudson Tunnel, which is going to focus very specifically on system preservation and no more than that.
No, I think Jeremy covered it well. We sort of see the Gateway program having two components. The first of which is sort of this preservation element, and the other bucket, if you will, is related to capacity expansion. While we were working on NEC Future, which is really looking at what the vision would be and what that capacity should be over the long term, we were very much focused on the preservation elements of the Gateway program that's been proposed. Now that NEC Future is complete, we have the ability to talk a little bit more about what the future looks like. So we can have discussions relative to capacity, but the Hudson Tunnel project itself is sort of on its own an important project that we're moving forward with. We continue to have conversations about all the other elements that are included under the Gateway program, because that's going to require a partnership across two states, multiple agencies, the federal government, of course, as well. So we're kind of partners in that process.
I just wanted to add briefly that 10-year Port Authority capital program that I referred to includes up to $2.7 billion committed by our agency as a way of demonstrating the region's commitment, reaching out to the federal government to try and move towards creating the funding package that's necessary for these investments.
All right, and there are two projects that are sort of overlapping with what both Lou and Rebecca talked about. So the Hudson Tunnel, we just talked about, and of course the Portal Bridge project, which is only in New Jersey. So it's not maybe germane here. It's the bridge that was featured on 60 Minutes a while back with name was Joe Boardman, pointing at it and saying we can build this now. Anyway, New Jersey Transit did successfully secure a $16 million Tiger grant. Thank you very much, USDOT. We provided $4 million of match, and early work activities are underway on that. But the Portal Bridge project, which again just replaces the existing two-track swing bridge over the Hackensack River, and the Hudson Tunnel are the components needed to maintain the system before we get into capacity.
Great. And I have one more before we get to, I know Carolyn has something and you have something. Lou, maybe a difficult question. As you're doing the Tier 2 EIS for the potential tunnel or enhanced flow, the technological advances that are before all of us planners and might affect demand, things like 3D printing and so forth. I know it's a difficult situation because we have the same thing with our long-range forecasts that you participate in. Will there be any attempt to anticipate potential changes based on technological advances?
That's a question really that probably is a better fit with the overall multimodal freight planning that we're all engaged in. There's our Goods Movement Action Program prepared jointly with the two state dots. Each of the MPOs has a freight planning component. A lot of the technologically driven things tend to focus on smaller packages, time-sensitive deliveries, so on and so forth. The readiest market for expanded rail freight activity are things like maritime cargo, commodities, lumber, other kinds of cargoes that are a little less time-sensitive. But we do need to see the big picture, and for the freight needs regionally, to meet the growth in demand in the midst of everything else that's happening in the network and all the growth, you probably need every tool in the toolbox, and we don't want to shortchange the potential for rail freight to be part of that overall regional strategy.
Great, thank you. Carolyn, you have a question.
Thanks for the shout out, Jerry. And I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to particularly thank for the extra tunnel across the Hudson. I like the idea that NEC Future is another extra tunnel, and so we should take this picture and, send it to the Times or something.
I think Rebecca's going to kill me after
So I just want, represent New York City, for those of you who don't know me, I want to acknowledge the distinction, and I think you guys are highlighting it, about the projects that are moving forward now and the real visionary sort of generational investments that are represented in the NEC Future study, which amongst things involve capacity expansions at Penn Station that we all want are not funded. There are many planning steps that have to get us to figure out exactly how that can be accommodated. And beyond that, other things that will have to happen to accommodate the future that NEC represents, including potentially additional tunnels through Queens up to the Hellgate, potentially additional capacity expansions above and beyond to create more additional capacity trans-Hudson if we continue to see the escalation in rates on rail and bus that we're currently seeing. And yet, the current Plan 2045, for at least I know the New York side, the New Jersey side, and I imagine for the rest of the map form here, really only start to tackle these issues in the current forecast. So I'm wondering what your perspectives are, particularly as all of these MPOs start to think about Plan 2050s and beyond, of how we start to recognize and span the gap between where we are at and those projects that are moving forward now and the next vision, if NEC is a good proxy for that, of future generational investments that may be necessary in the 20-plus year time horizon.
So I'll start. It's a perfect question because it gives me an opportunity to highlight that one of the challenges that we had in this visionary exercise during NEC Future, which is looking 2040 and frankly beyond, right? The infrastructure we're using in the corridor today, much of it is 100-plus years old. So we're building infrastructure to last generations, and the ability for the improvements to be realized over that time frame are dependent on so many things, depending on our ability as a region to come to some resolution about how we want to make improvements, but also the ability for funding to come and provide that investment in rail. And it's a challenging conversation to have about vision when we're dealing with assets that are in a need of state of good repair. So that balance in the visionary exercise is important because it helps us provide a foundation to make smarter decisions in the short term and midterm if we know where we're headed and if the region as a whole is sort of looking all in the same direction. So we need to have those conversations. They're absolutely critical. But it's hard to really think big when we're very much focused on fixing the existing infrastructure that we have today. So somehow we have to find the balance. I think the first key component of that dilemma, the solution to that dilemma, is conversations like this, the sort of continued engagement with all the partners at the table. And it's the NEC is a dynamic corridor because it's intercity, it's commuters, regional rail, it's also freight. So it's sort of as complex of a rail corridor as you could, possibly have to come up with a solution. The NEC sort of serves that. But that balance is a very hard balance, a hard balance amongst the agencies, and it's a particularly hard balance with the public. So it's important for us to continue to have conversations like this and put the issues on the table so we can find resolutions to them. But it's a struggle that we've had from the beginning of the process to sort of find that balance, but it's an important one.
I'd actually like to offer something there, too, because when you look at NEC Future as a whole, there is no institutional mechanism for decision-making on that scale in the federal system or even the state systems. How many different states?
There's 8 states in the District of Columbia.
So I think the map form needs to continue to expand. And soon we'll be our own country.
And share my world with all of you.
That's right. Yes, sir.
John Henry, freelance journalist. I'd like to ask either Jeremy or Rebecca about the ballooning cost of the Hudson Tunnel. I think it's now up at about $13 billion, and it's risen in a fairly short time from, I think, $6 or $7 billion. What's the reason?
So I don't think it was ever 6 or 7. There's really been one cost that was out there. As I mentioned, the project's engineering is moving towards a 30% design. As you get towards greater levels of design, the cost estimates can change. One thing that's in an early cost estimate would be a higher level of contingency, for example, that those things are all adjusted as sort of the project advances. One of the comments I mentioned earlier was, sort of about a lot of the, let's say, sort of misinformation that has been out there, or confusion about elements of the program and this and that. So I think some of the confusion about the cost really has been because people haven't really known what they're actually talking about in terms of the project elements, because this gateway thing is a very, as I mentioned, a very sort of large program composed of all kinds of different elements. And those numbers have been, I've read lots of articles where those numbers have been sort of put in and assigned to elements that aren't actually accurate. So there was a cost that was identified in the draft EIS, which is on the Hudson Tunnel Project website, HudsonTunnelProject.com. And that cost sort of carries both the construction of the new tunnel as well as the rehabilitation of the existing tunnel. That cost is based on a 10% design. As we get towards 30, that cost may be adjusted, but we're not there yet.
What was that cost?
It was something along the lines of what you mentioned. I don't recall exactly. I'm pinch hitting for someone on my staff who's actually managing the EIS.
And we have time for one more, so.
Peter Palmer, NGTPA Chair. 12 to 15 years from now, we'll have 4 tunnels across the Hudson River. And if Penn Station has not completed at that point, we really haven't gained anything. I think there's too much thought or expression that all we have to do is build the tunnels, and that's not the case. Penn Station's got to be done, it's got to be designed, and New Jersey should have an equal voice in determining that plan.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. So we are at the end of our time for the regional issues. Actually, Jose, we're right on time, so that's good.
We are.
Thank
we
you
are
to
right
our
on time, yeah.
Thank you to our panel. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Jerry, for leading this panel discussion, and Jerry and Rebecca and Lou, thank you very much. So this is a perfect segue into a public participation piece. We have, I think, about 5 speakers that have expressed an interest to say something, provide comments or questions. And I'm going to allot 3 minutes in the interest of time to each speaker. If we have any time left, we'll take additional comments or questions, but we want to keep the program on time. So with that, Mr. John Henry is the first speaker. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Matt Camper.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having this forum this afternoon. I was going to actually ask this in the regional issues because a lot of people have been expressing interest in this issue with the LIRR, especially a lot of people coming from Long Island, where I live, to New Jersey, especially to get to Secaucus Junction, to get to MetLife Stadium, especially for Giants and Jet games, really want to have LIRR go from one seat ride from Long Island to Secaucus Junction so people can get to Secaucus for transfers to the MetLife Stadium complex for all kinds of events. And I'm wondering if that is something that can be looked into, because it's a really big thing that a lot of people really want to happen. I understand with the third rail, I think it's a different system with third rail from the Long Island Railroad than NJT, and I'm just wondering if anybody has any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a comment that's been raised before, and I'm sure that there's a lot of different stakeholders that have looked at that or maybe looked at that. So our next speaker is, hope I pronounced the name correctly, Ms. Joanna Altman-Smith.
Hi.
Should I stay back here or come up?
You're welcome to come up.
I'll come up. Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Altman-Smith. I'm a Safe Streets advocate in New York, and I'm just excited to have the opportunity to talk about some thoughts I have on, mostly my perspective is from NYMTC, and I'm more familiar with their approach to things, but I think it's great to have everyone from the region in the room, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of the same things going on near your homes. Mine's just a ground view perspective. You know, I'm a transit user and I'm on the streets every day, and I just like to insert a little bit of everyday reality, you know, as we're talking about the bigger plans and the future ideas. Everyone, I don't know if you know, but just on Broadway and Liberty, 3 pedestrians ran over this afternoon, and then I just saw an SUV on top of a bike at Broadway and Wall in the last half hour. So that's what we're talking about, like all these, you know, ways to reduce the impact of freight on our streets and to make sure that people can get where they're going in a timely and safe fashion. It really comes down to what's happening right outside the door every day. So first off, I just wanted to say I'm heartened to see the emphasis on accurate data and analytics in this room. I think that's obviously the future of planning, and I wanted to ask you all to go home and make sure that your local leaders know that as well, because we have a certain mayor locally who really relies on anecdotes and a little bit of fear-mongering when making transportation policy and doesn't take the time to do the deep dive into the numbers. One example is his current stance on e-bikes, which from my reading have a possibility of decreasing all motorized trips in urban centers by 50%. But according to our mayor, it's just a full-blown war out there, and we can't even consider the possibility of integrating them into our transportation system. We also give far too much credence to local unelected community boards, citizen advisory boards. While obviously citizen voice has a place in the whole system, we should not be letting them stop very basic safety infrastructure projects that will save lives. That's a big one for me. I'm also interested in how NYMTC silos a lot of their goals, and I'm assuming some of the other MPOs do this. You know, you want to decide what are we going to focus on. There's so many things to focus on. But I see things being put under quality of life that to me are really urgent issues that have the capability to change a lot of things around the region. One example is active transportation. I see bikes and people walking under quality of life. No, that's like a major transportation option. That should be #1 priority. It's the cheapest to actually get down on the ground, has the biggest return for your investment, and is proven to, yes, improve quality of life, but also benefit our communities in so many other ways. Another one under that quality of life is placemaking, which I think is fantastic when we open up public spaces for people to use instead of vehicles. It's a huge economic driver. You just have to look at Times Square. It's not a quality of life issue. It's, you know, a major economic engine in our region. A last one I think I remember was accessibility was tucked under quality of life. No, accessibility is people's basic civil rights. You know, elderly and differently abled people need to be able to get where they're going. If they can't, their rights are being infringed upon. It's not a quality of life issue. We have a big answer in the region that no one's mentioned today, and I'm not sure it's the right forum, but I would like to just make sure you're all aware of the fair tolling and congestion pricing reform that's been proposed in the region. I think it has the capability to address a lot of the things I'm hearing today, everything from our crumbling infrastructure to all of the safety issues of too many vehicles on our streets that I'm worried about, to funding transit to get people out of their cars and into the cities and back home again easily. I'm hoping that you guys are all talking about that at home and encouraging leadership to focus on that as an answer.
and then I'm sure I'm over time, but just one quick word on autonomous vehicles, which I also haven't heard anything about. Okay, quick. People working on AVs are often referring to people outside of vehicles as objects or outside actors. You guys have to help reframe this, because you can just see from US DOT, they just came out with guidelines. They barely mention humans at all. So thank you so much for your time, and keep up the good work.
Thank you for your comments, Thank you. Our next speaker is Jordan Osander.
I wrote down tentative, but after hearing the roundtable presentation, it's very encouraging to see coordination between all the planning agencies. But as planners, we have to think forward into the future, and we are limited by jurisdictions and the like, and those jurisdictions may change in the future. And watching this whole process over the years, I've had my heart broken on numerous occasions by projects that are built as compromises, and such as losing the rail transit option on the Tappan Zee replacement, the Second Avenue subway being a truncated version and a two-track design, where many of these things are built as economic and political compromises rather than serving the future needs that they could potentially alleviate so many problems. We're still thinking about Penn Station as really two terminals instead of a station. And that's probably due to, operating constraints, of course, the differences in third rails and catenary. But looking at the Trans-Harbor Freight Tunnel, in terms, is this going to be built as one track or two, and its potential for disaster preparedness, and like as an alternative, should one of the or multiple tunnels be knocked out to Penn Station. So it is eventually going to be needed for passenger use. If you just look at the demographics in terms of regional mobility, and to at least design in that capacity, I hope we are thinking outside the boxes which we're constrained to, and that's what I'd love to see happen. And again, you people have your own constraints, financial and jurisdictional. I hope we get around that, and that's pretty much what I'll limit my comment to. Thank you so much. And who do I return this to?
Thank you, Mr. Osander. And our final, but not last, speaker is Mr. George Helix.
I have a statement that could be distributed to the audience to help. I'll come up at the podium. I'll try to read fast. Here, is this on? Yeah. Okay. My name is George Hypalis. I'm the president of the Institute for Rational Urban Mobility. IRUM is a New York City-based nonprofit concerned with reducing motor vehicular congestion and improving the livability of dense urban places. IRUM commends the MAP Forum, planning agencies, for continuing to come together to devise a collective vision for a sustainable, cost-effective transportation system that will ensure a prosperous and just future for the 22 million people living and working in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and I guess Pennsylvania Metropolitan Area. IRM urges the MAP Forum to take the lead in shaping a comprehensive regional rail system plan that would wake up the sleeping giant mobility, the region's 3 commuter rail lines, and transform them into a 21st century transport system with integrated fares, frequent service, and through running. Toward this end, the MAP Forum should establish a working group that would include affected units of local government, civic organizations, and the railroads themselves, meeting regularly to develop a vision for this costly, taxpayer-funded, underperforming regional transport asset. This working group would review many options, but should especially focus on the three alternative visions for a new regional rail line, trunk line, proposed by RPA, Rethink New York City, and our own group, IRA. Given the impending drastic cuts in federal funding for even basic transportation investments, the map forum is urged to take a careful look at IRM's plan to route the new Hudson Tunnel by way of Hoboken instead of by way of Secaucus. This plan would cut the cost of increasing much-needed rail capacity by 75% compared to the current plan. Routing the new tunnels by way of Hoboken and connecting them directly to New Jersey Morristown line offers a number of advantages. They're in the handout. I won't read them now. IRM also urges the map forum to give careful consideration to the Penn Station Grand Central connection, which would avoid the need to expand Penn Station to the south, which would require acquisition of dozens of buildings and displace thousands of workers. The connection was described in the 31-page summary report to the ARC project. A map forum should request that all relevant information about this connection be immediately made available to the public. Transparency should be the critical element in planning for this much-needed Hudson Tunnel project. IRM urges forum participants to review the attached thumbnail. You'll see on the back there's a plan, to take note of IRM's comments in the draft EIS for the Hudson Tunnel. There's a link shown at the bottom of this handout. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak again after all these years, many years.
Thank you, Mr. Akas. So we're on our final item on the agenda. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, both NYMTC and NJTPA have recently adopted regional transportation plans. And so today we have Jan Khan from NYMTC to talk about NYMTC's plan, and Joyce Goldman from NJTPA. She will be talking about NJTPA's plan. Jan?
Thank you very much. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome members of the other MPOs. The long-range transportation plan is one of the mandated and ongoing stories of the MPO's life. It's one of the things we have to do. So basically our stories are generally the same because the federal government dictates what gets into the plan. But the scope and method that we use may be different. So, and here in our region, issues tend to be the same. As Jose pointed out, in June of this year, the Council adopted NYMTC's long-range transportation plan, regional transportation plan, which is called Plan 2045, which replaced, and you guessed it, Plan 2040. So basically what this slide does is just to tell you, as Lois Goldman, who will be talking about the NJTPA's plan, will also tell you. The regional transportation plan is really the basis for federal funding coming to the NYMTC planning area, which is the Nassau suburb, Rockland, Putnam, Westchester, and 5 boroughs of New York City. It's really a blueprint that guides the way federal investments are made in our planning area, and it represents the NYMTC members' shared vision for the planning area. You know, it's mandated that in our planning area that we have a new plan every 4 years, and this is because of transportation conformity issues that we have in our planning area. Some MPOs are required to do their plans every 3 years. There's always a change in population and employment growth that dictates that you really need to update your plans. Funding sources change over time. There are new information about project costs and financial resources that are available. The members will review their priorities and determine, how these change over time. There are always ongoing new federal requirements and priorities. As we recognize in our Plan 2045, there are technological developments that will impact our future. And because of the new projects that we have in our plan, we have to do new air quality forecasts. For our plan, which I should say includes, when I say our regional transportation plan, it includes the freight plan, the coordinated public transit human services transportation plan, pedestrian and bicycle and so on. So when I'm talking about our regional transportation plan, it includes all of those components. And for all of them, we did extensive, to get to June of this year, we did extensive public outreach using websites and virtual public workshops, online surveys. We did a video, we did in-person workshops, we did a number of focus groups. We have public advisory working groups which we use to help us to develop the plan. And then we got a lot of feedback through social media, whether it was Twitter or Facebook. So we had a really extensive public involvement process to get to the adoption of the plan. In the NYMTC planning area, on the slide there you see the future challenges that we speak to in Plan 2045. And again, this may be no different than the challenges that are facing the other MPOs in the room. We have an enormous transportation system which we need to operate and preserve. We have to consider changes that may occur in the future. There is growth that is happening in the region, which I'll talk to in a moment, which includes travel, goods movement, and there will be increasing congestion we are projecting. And there's an always extending mega-regional travel shift. Our current transportation system accommodates millions of daily riders, which everyone is familiar with, as well as millions of tons of freight. And the details of these are in our plan at nymtec.org. The current transportation system is extensive and aging. And when I get to the financial slide, you'll see how much of our funds will have to go towards preserving the huge system that we have. And NYMTC's planning area is projected to grow in population, employment, and travel, as I mentioned previously. How does our plan respond to challenges? It does so by being built around a strategic framework, which includes the strategic goals set by our principals and members, which has some accompanying related desired outcomes. I think you heard some from the lady who spoke. We have some near-term actions that are listed in the plan, which we need to achieve to get towards our goals and outcomes. The plan includes some sustainability features, which is really the theme of one of the themes of the plan. And of course, we are mandated to have the plan fiscally constrained, and from that to determine project eligibility and selection. The strategic goals in the plan are listed here, which ranges from enhancing the regional environment to building the case for obtaining resources. And our members, the council has been a consortium effort not to prioritize these goals. I mean, the goals are important, but our priorities lay in the type of investments that are needed at particular points in time during the life cycle of the plan. One of the things I wanted to highlight is the sustainability feature in our plan, which is which we call the coordinated development emphasis areas. And these areas are ones that provide a framework for sustainable growth and development, and targets various types of development that are determined by our members for transportation investment. In terms of fiscal constraints, what this slide does is to give you a sense of what it costs on average per year to maintain our transportation system, to operate and maintain it, and then to preserve it, and to give you a sense of if we can achieve the type of system enhancements that we probably should have, what it will cost. And, you know, that cost is really $75 billion. The next slide will show you that the total cost of that we project in Plan 2045 for system preservation and system enhancements is $496 billion. The resources we project, and you see that little note at the bottom that says at the federal upper limit, because we did two scenarios, one with a lower limit, one with an upper limit. But for the purposes of our plan, we're using the upper limit. That amounts to about $493 billion. So there's a shortfall of about $3 billion over the life of the plan. And the plan does discuss supplemental funding sources that could be made available, or that our members could address, could attempt to do over the life of the plan to get to the $3 billion. This is just an example of the major system enhancements in the constraint plan. It's probably difficult for you to see, but these are projects, the major projects that we have in the constraint part of our plan, which includes things like the Lower Hudson Transit Link, Penn Station access, and so on. This is really just to give you a flavor of what's in our plan. In our plan, we have constraint projects which fit into the fiscal envelope, and we also have vision projects, which are there just in case funds become available and or the priorities of our members, our principals change. So these are some of the vision, major vision projects that we are thinking about. And as you see here, it would be, you know, the total cost of these could range from $50 to $75 billion. And finally, there are other projects that we look at, smaller type of projects which are in the plan, which for each of one of the counties and their boroughs. So what this map does is just to show you the type of project. This is an example of Suffolk County and the type of projects that we have, both in constraint and vision element of the plan. And pretty much that's a quick overview of what Plan 2045 is about. And I think now Liz Goldman from NJTPA will speak to NJTPA's plan.
No, I think maybe we'll just have you present NJTPA's plan, and then Jerry is going to talk about the common issues and involve MPOs. So we'll take questions afterwards.
That's good, and that way they'll forget what I said.
Well, I want to thank Jan for covering about half of what I was going to say. So, okay, here's my slides, and I just, how do I do this? I'm sorry. Got it? No? Oh, next. Okay, definitely, page down. Page down. I got it. No, not working. Oh, escape. Thank you. Page down. Okay, we got it. All right. So I'm not going to go over everything that Jen already said. She said it a lot better than I could have. But basically, we do have goals very similar. We did add a safety goal, a specific safety goal, but our other goals also address the environment, the economy, goods movement, and things like that. Our public input comment, we heard from about 3,000 people in our region, and we did that through some very innovative outreach. We did pop-up and meetings in all 15 subregions. We call our counties in the two major cities of New York and Jersey City our subregions. And we also had surveys.
We went to historic festivals. We also met with millennials and low-income folks, and really had an amazing outreach component to our plan. Our plan also covers a lot of trends and needs. So, for example, we project our population to grow by 17% to about 7.7 million people, and our employment to grow by 14% to 3.4 million jobs. And then we also had, we have a financial element which contains 3 scenarios. Just as you did 2 scenarios, we have a base scenario that we call our Plan 2045 scenario. Then we have one that is limited and one that's aspirational. And also we tie our plan very closely to the Together North Jersey plan. These are some of the game changers that, your plan also looked at. We didn't say which ones we thought would happen, but just that we want to be kind of aware that all and any of these things could be happening in the next 27, 28 years. I want to talk for 1 minute about the Together North Jersey Regional Plan, because that really is a foundation for our plan. Excuse me. Just as the New York, Connecticut region had a USDOT and HUD grant, we did a regional plan for sustainable development, which was completed in 2015. And the goals are very much the same: TOD, resiliency, better, integration of land use and transportation. And we have 4 things that came out of that: competitive, efficient, livable, and resilient. And those really became, like I said, the organizing element for our plan. Again, the plan highlights, as we've already talked about, are the needs of the Hudson Tunnel and Trans-Hudson capacity, transportation technology, the freight, needs of freight, resiliency, and safety is a very important element for us as well. Now, what I'd like to do now is just very quickly walk through how we integrated the Together North Jersey plan into, I'm way behind on my notes here, by the way, into Plan 2045. And we use these 4 things: competitive, efficient, livable, and resiliency, to really talk about different kinds of strategies. So, for example, under competitive strategies, we talked about needs for freight movement and how important that is. For the efficient strategies, we talked about safety. And New Jersey has a Towards Zero Deaths goal, which is similar to Vision Zero. And using our Strategic Highway Safety Plan goals and strategies, which were adopted in 2015, how can we meet that goal? We also looked at transportation technology and the connected corridor, and how can communities and agencies work together. We're looking at the livable strategies. We looked at transit-oriented development and complete streets. And then finally, for resiliency strategies, we looked at how can we start to make our region more resilient, as well as doing additional planning, building on what we heard a little bit earlier from Brian, to really start to identify the areas that we should be looking at. And one of them is the Passaic River Basin, which we're doing a study right now. That's the wrong font. Our plan also has a regional capital investment strategy, which builds on those themes of competitive, efficient, livable, and resilient. This regional capital investment strategy helps to guide our investments into the ways to build, to implement the plan. And as Jen said, about 85% of our funding is also for conservation and maintenance of the system. We did, in Plan 2045, add a resiliency goal. Just very quickly, I just want to talk about our financial element. Only $112.8 billion. And it does, we had the 3 scenarios, as I mentioned, and we had, the constrained scenario includes the Portal Bridge North, it includes the new Hudson Tunnel, and all the projects that are in the 10-year NJDOT capital program, as well as projects and programs going out to 2045. One of the things that we did talk about, and this may be, Jerry, a topic for future discussions, would be alternative funding solutions. And so we also looked at things like what could a gas tax rate, what could value capture rate, what could other VMT taxes and other things that recognizing that we also don't have the resources long-term that would be needed. So I thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Jerry. Thank you.
So to finish up, I read both plans cover to cover. Yeah, I'm still here in conscience. Really, what's interesting here is that although the plans are coordinated, they also are independent in many ways, yet there are various common themes that are instructive, and this will be quick. First of all, critical projects. What we call in the map form is boundary projects, projects that may be on a physical boundary between our organizations, but maybe not, but they affect more than one organization. So Trans-Hudson projects, obviously the Portland North Bridge is an important part of that. NEC Future affects both of us, and there's the Cross Harbor Freight Program and other interrelated freight projects, and we do have a significant amount of coordination both with New Jersey and Connecticut on freight issues. So critical projects is a common theme. Also the programmed and aspirational projects, both of our system enhancements, identified system enhancements, tend to be transit focused. Ours are a little bit more than yours, but you know, clearly there's a recognition that transit needs to be enhanced as well as the overall transportation system. There's a lot of system preservation, and there's initial resilience projects here, and alternative financing options. You mentioned what you looked at. We looked at similar ones. That's to recognize the fact that we aspire to certain things, but we don't have the funding for them. Coordinated development and livability is in both plans. Jan mentioned our coordinated development emphasis areas, which provide something of a land use framework for transportation improvements. You have Together North Jersey and all the work that was done there, which is similar. So again, both MPOs are looking at the land use aspects of transportation planning. And finally, anticipating change. You call it game changers, we call it drivers of change. There's a lot out there that could change what's going to happen over the next 25 years. Technological, generational, and so forth. It's hard to anticipate now what those impacts are going to be quantitatively, but we all have to keep an eye on that. And those technological developments could also be applied to the transportation system to improve it, as well as affecting the demand for it. So, in 2 seconds, that's my take. Are we going to stop for questions? Or?
Yeah, sure. Although we've reached our allotted time, but we'll open up for about 5 minutes and maybe 2 or 3 questions.
A former intern.
I believe you said scholar earlier today. This is more of a comment to the forum, really a challenge. There's another common theme that we've seen throughout this. There's a lot of examples of projects up there that are completely driven by politics and not have any logical sense whatsoever. Our politicians at every level, regardless of party, don't necessarily know what is best in the transportation world, and yet we are required to go forward with a lot of projects that make absolutely no sense for our region and take time and resources away from the projects that do. So my challenge, obviously, everyone wants to keep their jobs as they are running the show. My challenge to the forum is, how do we push back and say, you are experts in transportation and what we do, and some of these projects aren't necessary. Whereas maybe we should be focusing on other ones that are really going to help the region and not the things that are going to be splashy and have the laser light show and the fancy ribbon cutting. So my challenge to you is coming together to really push back against some of the elected officials so that we're focusing on what's necessary, not what's not.
Thanks. I'll leave that one to my boss.
I think we're going to hire a bunch of people that are close to retirement to do that.
Any other questions? Over here. Caroline. No, but we have the webinar, so.
Thanks, and I appreciate the provocations. I think those, it really behooves all of us to think about that. The one thing I wanted to comment on is the commonality about land use and transportation in both plans. I think that is a real improvement in both plans that it's in there, and obviously it's indicative of the work that's being done on both sides of the river to really think about how in every locality we do transit-oriented development, and we're linking those. One thing that I think could be improved improved over time, and I'd be interested to think about how the map form can help that, is how the two plans actually speak to each other with regards to that land use planning. So one of the things that we've identified and we've talked to NYMTC about is that the relationship of trans-Hudson capacity problems is directly related to a lot of population growth in New Jersey that's not being met with economic development in New Jersey right now. Obviously, the hope is that those two patterns do change, but it is hard to plan for the transportation capacity issues without understanding how those population and economic centers are working. And there's a difference in the specificity of where population is going at a really granular level. If we're talking about a lot of growth in Newark at the train station and in Jersey City at the train station versus things that are more supported by the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail and North-South movement versus suburban locations along the New Jersey transit system, how those relate to New York City, which has experienced the most job growth and employment growth, and thus growth from the New Jersey side in the last 5 years than we've experienced ever historically, is really important. So I just want to highlight that it's very good improvement that we're all thinking about specific areas where we want to highlight those, but how they talk to each other and what the priority areas in New Jersey are, what those relationships are back to the New York City side, speaks directly to what kinds of trans-Hudson investments we need to prioritize.
And it's an excellent point. I do want to point out that we forecast together, but that's not the same as what you're talking about. It's a step towards it. And it may be something we'll talk about, whether or not that's something we should talk about in the future at the map form level. Thank you for that.
So, one last question.
And just to follow up on that comment, I think what you might be saying is there's a difference between forecasting and then shaping future flows and demands, right? That's kind of an iterative process that I think could definitely, come into play with both groups. So my question specifically is, I constantly hear regional rail come up. I mean, it came up twice earlier, and I never hear a good answer why it's not considered with more seriousness. Can somebody say just what is the top barricade to regional rail?
It depends on how you define regional rail. Through running and so forth, there's certainly coordination in major studies to look at that. In various efforts over the years, that's either been included or ruled out of individual studies based on a number of factors, including cost and time and so forth. But beyond that, there really hasn't been a comprehensive look, other than what RPA has done with the RX and now with what's in their new plans. That's not happening. It's probably a group. It certainly is. And I think bodies like this exist to begin to look at that and look at addressing issues like that.
Well, thank you everyone for coming in today, for participating in this event. Hope you enjoyed it. Our next...
What about the people on the web? You haven't called anybody from the web.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have that? Any questions?
Well, I've just spent 2 hours listening to you.
I'm sorry. Do I have any questions on the web?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the fellow.
I'm running around to do 3 events tonight, but I'll try and reach over the weekend.
Hello? Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, I'd like the fellow from Hudson Tunnels. I'd like to ask a question.
I don't think Jeremy is here, so I don't think we'll have anyone that can answer that question.
Okay.
Bill, is that you?
Pardon me?
Is that Bill Galligan?
Yeah, it is Bill Galligan. That's correct. All right. I had, I've been listening to this and I found it interesting, but I'm disappointed that you didn't call on the people. I may be the only one on the webinar.
No, you're not. But can I follow up with you by phone?
Yeah, I'd like the fellow who talked for the Hudson Tunnel maybe to call me up as well, because I have questions for him.
We'll put that
together. Okay.
All right.
I'll send you my...
Anyone else in the webinar has a question?
Well, it's not a joke. That's, you know...
No, we'll follow up with you offline. We'll make sure that your questions get answered. Jerry will follow up with NJ Transit, and we'll address.
Well, I want to deal with it directly. I don't want a middleman. That's why these groups are good.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, there's no one here that can answer your specific question right now, so we'll follow up with you. Thank you. Anyone else in the webinar has a question? Okay. Again, thank you everyone for participating today. The next MAP Forum meeting, I believe, will be in the spring of 2018, and will be held in Connecticut. Hopefully, we'll get the same kind of participation we have today. Thank you very much.